1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello and welcome to The Right Hype. My name is Gavon and it is a beautiful Monday morning here in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I had today off, so I decided to do some recording, and it's been about a month since I've posted, so apologies. Work and life have been pulling me in so many different directions, but I am determined to carve out time and make time to continue to post on The Right Hype, which, if you've been following The Right Hype on Substack, you should be receiving a regular weekly flow of information from me on that platform. For those who are new, The Right Hype identifies where hype is actually accumulating, where trust is eroding, and how to build brand relevance that actually lasts. This is really for someone who is a founder, who is a creative thinker, a strategist, or really working in the marketing field as well. I am all of those things, so I bring all of those sort of hats into this podcast, and I'm excited to learn more about you guys in the audience and what you're looking for. You know, what are the titles and roles that you're constantly navigating and shifting? What are the rooms and the conversations that are being had? So if you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments. I'm always open to hearing your stories and having this podcast sort of grow on purpose with the audience. I have been experiencing growth recently in my own career as a strategist, and this episode really is sort of a summary of some of the topics that I've been thinking about, some of the skills that I've been sharpening, and I really wanted to package it up in a series so that as a reader, you have a journey from one article to the next. This series that I'm introducing today is called The Strategist I, and it is a collection of articles that dives into some of the skills that I've been working on as a strategist who works with creatives. I get a lot of questions from people all the time asking me what I do. You know, how do I actually work on campaigns? How do I work with brands? It seems like that side of my industry is very opaque, and it's hard to sort of, if you're not on the inside, understand how it all works. So the goal of this podcast is always to bring that insight to you guys. And the Strategist Eye is just one way that I'm doing it, particularly for strategists, because, and not just strategists, but also strategic thinkers, because we all have to navigate this world, and the future is very uncertain, and those who are prepared and those who can think on their feet, think strategically, put themselves in a position to win, to benefit from this moment. And so I want to help sort of bring that thinking to you all. When I started my career in strategy, I didn't have formal training, so I'm really creating this series for that early to mid career strategist who might not know all the ideas or the terms or what's right from wrong. I think amongst all the assets, there is just such an important asset, which is judgment and discernment. And we can all use that in other aspects of our lives. It doesn't just have to be for work. But in this specific context, like, judgment is having the ability to know when something is done and when something needs to be pushed further. And so at the crux of this series is to build judgment, to sharpen judgment, and to just get to better answers quicker and more confidently. So yeah, that's a bit of background on what this series is. There was a quote that came to mind that helps to sort of encapsulate the stakes of getting it wrong. You know, it also sets up like why strategic thinking is important, and the things that we aren't often talking about is there is a version of strategy that looks like the thinking, it's the frameworks, it's the decks, it's the number of briefs that you're answering. And then there's another part of strategic thinking, and it's all about how you see the world. And that is hard to teach because it truly is about developing an instinct and relying on your own gut. to get you to the right answer. So it's not as scientific as someone would think, or it doesn't require years and years of formal education or any education. It's really about how do you see the world and how does that apply to like problem solving and thinking. So I don't want you to come into this series thinking that I'm going to throw a bunch of frameworks at you. I am going to help you think about the things that are harder to name. And that's taste, that's observation, that's conviction, and it's the ability to translate thinking into something a room can feel and they want to buy into. It's so funny, like telling a story is just as effective as like throwing a bunch of facts at people. And so that's my goal, is really to sit within that more emotional space, not always the logic, because logic is sort of something that we use to rationalize our decisions. And we do it a lot in strategy, where we use logic to rationalize um, our insight, our emotions, the things that are hard to name. But I want to talk about those things that are really hard to name, because that's the difference between, I think, someone that is really good at their job to someone who can really excel in strategy. So the title of this series is called The Strategist Eye. It's a series on how strategists engage with creative work. The first article in this series is called Before the Vibe, and it's all about how great campaigns start with a problem, not an aesthetic. The second article is called Earn Your Eye, and it's about how strategists can develop taste and why it is a skill that nobody teaches you. The third article is called The Board is the Brief, and it's all about how strategists can use mood boards to build creative conviction in the room. And last but not least is The Observer's Edge, and it's the best strategic insights come from the world, not the internet. So this is a 4-part series that you can check out on Substack. They will be all available to you in the month of April. I'll be releasing them once a week. As I'm recording this, Before the Vibe is already out. Earn Your Eye is coming up next. So when you go to Substack, hit the subscribe button so that you get the notifications on when the next article drops. All right, so kicking it off with Before the Vibe, how great campaigns start with a problem, not an aesthetic. I really wanted to start here because this is actually how I got into advertising and strategy. Was actually, I really loved campaign work. I can remember very vividly opening up GQ magazine and seeing a picture of Jaden Smith modeling for Louis Vuitton. And I don't know why, but that image just sticks out to me to this day. It's the reason why I love advertising and marketing. And for me, I was thinking, like, what went into this shoot? What were the decisions? Who were the decision makers? I'm able to like look back and understand actually that was not just a beautiful campaign imagery, it was solving a problem for the brand. Brands spend a lot of money to put advertisements in magazines, and they don't just do it because the image looks pretty, but they want to sell product. They want to communicate a sensibility or a type of lifestyle. And so a campaign isn't just a vibe, it's a solution. And the vibe is just proof that someone understood the problem well enough to build something so beautiful and something that actually like captures the audience and makes them want to buy or talk about the brand. And as a younger strategist, my instinct was to reverse engineer, what was happening in this image. And what it taught me is that it's not just pretty images. There is a psychological relationship that advertisements build with humans. And it's our job as strategists to understand the like core tension or a core motivation and how that actually like can impact creative and make the creative stronger. So one of the things that was super helpful for me in my career when it came to approaching campaigns, because that's what I fell in love with at first, is having some form of framework that I can come back to test the rigor of my thinking. essentially. And so this framework has 5 steps, which I think is so cool to follow, especially if you do it over and over, have it with different brands, have it with different situations. You start to see why it is important to start with a problem. The problem is the stake in the ground. It's what the brand or business is actually up against. A lot of brands will say, oh, we have an awareness issue or we have a sales issue. And it's sort of my job to dig a little bit deeper. Like, are you actually dealing with a loss of relevance? Or is there a perception gap? Do you think one way and your actual consumer thinks another? Is there like a new trend in the category that's actually working against you? Like, sometimes there's a new innovation, and if you're not up to standards or if you're not like up to beat with what's happening in your space, you can get left behind, and that could also create a perception of not being relevant or not understanding culture. And so it's important to name the problem and name it clearly, because then you'll know what good work looks like. Then you'll know what you're actually solving, and it's not just to create a vibe, but it's actually to solve a problem that the business is experiencing. The second piece is the audience. And the audience is important because you don't want to talk to just everybody. You want to be specific with who you're talking to and what they're going through. Most people aren't just looking to buy or looking to be advertised to. So if you are going to advertise to someone, you should make it worth it. It should feel like you understand them, that you get them. And the best sort of advertising sells a solution. It closes the gap between what someone wants or where they are today to where they want to go or what they want to achieve. And so getting them to that endpoint is like super important to showcase, and having a good understanding of the audience and what they're going through and how your brand can support them is really important. The third step is gathering an insight. And this is probably the hardest part of the process. An insight is not just an observation, it's sort of the motivation that sits underneath an observation, and it explains why people behave the way that they do or feel the way that they feel or want the things that they want. If an insight is too obvious or someone could have said it without really doing any work, then it's not really an insight, which really pushes us as strategists and strategic thinkers to understand what's really driving behaviors. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room with other strategic thinkers, just people, and we talk about insights. And they oftentimes are the most basic observations. And that's not a negative thing, because I do believe it's good to also like be observant and to use like your daily surroundings as data, as a way to look at the world, as a way to understand people better. But an insight really does get into this emotional core that oftentimes may feel uncomfortable to like say out loud or travel to. But it's like there was an example that I had recently asked Claude AI to sort of validate. It was because I was watching Mad Men. Mad Men is like a fictitious series that was created, I want to say in like 2005 or something like that, 2009. And it was all about the advertising executives who worked on Madison Ave in New York. And one of the guys was trying to sell deodorant or like aftershave gel or something like that. The guy kept asking the women in his life, what does a woman want? What does a woman want? And one of the things I thought of was, women want other women to compliment their men, their like boyfriends, right? Like, why would a woman want to buy this like aftershave gel or cologne? It's, oh, because she wants like the external validation of others, is what I thought at first. When I asked Claude, is this an insight? Claude basically said, not quite, because anyone could really say it, but like it's the why they want the external validation. And one of the things that it parsed apart was women aren't looking for external validation on their boyfriend choice, not based on the qualities of the man. but more or less a reflection of her taste. And that to me was like, oh, okay. So it's not just she wants external validation. She wants external validation of her taste, which is takes it from just an observation to an insight because it gets a little bit deeper. So hopefully that was a way to illustrate what I mean by an insight. It's kind of fascinating just talking about this stuff out loud because rarely do I get to like teach it in this way. So hopefully you're able to follow along and understand the core of the insight. We then get to this question, given the insight, what is the brand uniquely positioned to say or do? And this is really where the strategy stops being about the audience and starts being about the brand. And it's that connection between the human truth and where the brand can play, where this should actually bring the brand into a new space creatively. And step 5 is like the idea. It needs to be the outcome of everything above. So steps 1 through 4 should get you to step 5. And this is really the idea is a tension that the brand should hold. It's not always about resolving tension, but it is about manifesting how people actually see the world and make sense of the world. And if you can do that in a really creative, clever way and make the audience feel understood, then that's you've hit the sweet spot. You've essentially found an emotionally resonant campaign platform that can then be executed through content or through an experience, or if you want to talk about your product in a new way. But that's really where, all pays off. All the heady strategic work that you do up front creates this inevitable campaign idea that just feels so strong by the time you get to it. So that's the sequence. Each step has its own sort of question, and each answer earns the next one so that the campaign isn't just a vibe, it's a real solution for a brand. Before I wrap up this episode, there are two things that I want to mention. One of them is insights, and the second is about taste. You're probably tired of hearing me talk about insights, but I want to really push you as thinkers to go beyond the internet. Try and find stories that haven't been cataloged by the algorithm. Go out and have real experiences and stories that you can tell of your own. The internet gives you the perspectives that got published, but the world gives you everything that didn't. And I believe, and this is where I'm pretty bullish on, is the most proprietary insight you'll ever have is one that the algorithm cannot index. The more proprietary, I think the more special the insight, and I believe you get a stronger reaction because it doesn't feel like it's been done or said or regurgitated by someone else. The internet is not going to have all the answers, but it is important to go there, but it's just kind of using it more as a way to like understand what's already been told, what's exhausted, and then where is the opportunity to do something different? Where is that opportunity space? I was having a conversation with my coworker just about the difference of being in the culture and understanding the nuances of culture versus treating culture like it's a salad dressing that you like throw on top of everything else versus it truly being like a core emotionally resonant insight that just takes you to the center of culture where conversations are happening. So that's the power of the insight. And I wanted to just like spend a little bit more time on that because I think a lot of us in creative fields, and whether you're creative, a strategist, a founder, are starting to realize the importance of culture marketing and understanding your consumer on a cultural level, not just a logical or emotional level. And the second thing that I wanted to touch on before I wrap things up is taste. Taste, not from a creative sense, although that is important. I'm talking about taste as it relates to judgment and having a point of view and discernment. And this is important for a strategist because taste isn't always what looks good. It's about knowing when something is there versus when it's genuinely right or if it's, needs some more work. So that is important because when you're working with creatives, it's important to know, not just like what looks good, but it's also important to know like what you're fighting for. What is the idea that you're looking to execute? You want to create the right parameters so that you don't deviate from the insight in the way that the insight doesn't even feel strong enough anymore. I think having taste helps because it enables you to influence the room, influence opinions, and influence execution at the end of the day. Awesome. So, just to close you out on this one quote, strategy is not just a way of thinking, it's a way of moving through the world. The eye you develop is the advantage nobody can replicate because nobody else was standing where you were standing. This framework is learnable, it's easy to access, but what will separate you from the rest of the pack is knowing what is good, having that eye, sharpening it, and not being afraid of feedback and learning where you can grow. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned in my career that has sharpened my taste and my instincts over time is actually feedback. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope it helped you to think and inspired your own, practice of sharpening your insights and sharpening your taste. Please, if you have not, go over to Substack, subscribe. I'll be releasing articles on this very topic once a week. I think I'm going to actually extend this series out for another month or so, but stay tuned because that's where I'll be also posting some extra information about some events and some activations that are coming down the line that I'm excited to meet the community at. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.